We're so thrilled to have Dr. Julian Grenier with us today. I'm sure you've all sure you've all heard of him. He's going to discuss how we can effectively engage parents and carers to improve the outcomes of the children in our care. Just a couple of things about Julian. He's the Senior Content and Engagement Manager for the early years at the Education Endowment Foundation. He was the head teacher of Sheringham Nursery School and Children's Centre in Newham, East London. He served as a national leader of education and was the director of East London Research School. And in 2022, he was awarded the CBE for his services to early years education. So that's quite an achievement. So over to you, Julian.
Great, thank you so much. Let me just get my slides. Okie doke. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining this morning. I know it's always incredibly busy in early years settings, and it's great to have people live joining us with their cameras on and just giving that sense of that you're there in your feedback. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. So I'm going to talk about effective parental engagement in the early years, and I guess a lot of what I say is going to come from my experience of leading Sure Start Children's Centre in nursery school for kind of the best part of 20 years, working with hundreds and hundreds of parents and carers during that time. I now work for the Education Endowment Foundation, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what the EEF does, who we are, because that will make sense of some of what I say during this morning's session. So the EEF is an independent charity, and our job is finding out what works in education, including early years. So we know there's like a lot of opinions out there. A lot of people will try and sell you their program or their approach. And we're here to check out the evidence behind different approaches that people take in early years to help practitioners like yourselves make the best choices. And our mission as a charity is all about improving outcomes for children who are experiencing disadvantage, children growing up in poverty. And this theme, parental engagement, is a very important part of that piece of work. So the EEF has 3 areas of activity. All 3 are rooted in research evidence. So they are about summarising research evidence, which is really a lot of what I'm going to try and do this morning. Tell you about the evidence we've got around parental engagement so that you can think through some of the most effective approaches to take. So we do a lot of work around summarising. We also generate new research evidence. So we fund lots and lots of trials in settings just like yours to find out whether approaches work or don't work. And we're also here to encourage evidence use. The research evidence can feel like it's something complicated or something you wish you had time for. We know how busy everyone is. I've been in shoes that are similar to yours, and I know how hard pressed and how long those days can be. So we're here about encouraging research evidence use in practical ways that will fit in with the demands you face all of the time in your setting. How do we do this? So the main resource we've got that summarizes research evidence is called the Early Years Evidence Store. That covers key research evidence in the prime areas of the EYFS and also includes a focus on children's mental health and well-being. And when you dig into the evidence store, you'll see not only accessible summaries of what the research evidence says, but as you scroll down, you'll see some real live videos taken in everyday contexts showing early years educators putting those practices into action. And they can be really great reflection and discussion points in team meetings and staff training days. And we've got some additional content on things like improving early education through high quality interactions. As I said earlier, supporting children's mental health and well-being in the early years, which we know is a really key priority at the moment. And the evidence store is a really big product. It's had roughly 400,000 views, so that's moved on a bit since I put this slide together, and over 100,000 unique users. So we know it's out there and being used. And if you haven't been onto our evidence store, I would definitely encourage you to take a look. We also summarize research evidence through guidance reports. And one of our guidance reports is the one I'm going to be focusing on this morning, working with parents to support children's learning. You can search for that online and download it for free. And I was one of the people who was involved in putting that guidance report together. It does cover the full age range from early years through to secondary, but there are lots of key messages there, which are powerful and relevant to us in the early years. So you can just search online for our guidance report, working with parents to support children's learning, and you can download that for free. I also told you earlier that we are adding to the evidence base in early years. We're generating new research evidence. So we're working with hundreds, in fact, well over 1,000 early years settings to contribute to new research evidence in the early years. So, for example, if you've come across the Maths Champions program, that's a program that we've evaluated in several hundred early years settings, and our evaluation tells us that that's an effective program that helps children to boost their progress in learning maths, and it's particularly powerful for children facing socioeconomic disadvantage. So those children who are growing up in child poverty, for whom their early education is so key, they're the children that are particularly benefiting from the Maths Champions program. We also encourage evidence use by taking what could be complex research evidence and making it more straightforward for people to use. So, for example, the Schrick approach, which we developed at Sheringham Nursery School together with the EEF, is about taking lots of research evidence around supporting children's communication and then simplifying that into an approach which is easy to remember and easy to put into practice. And I'll talk a little bit about the Schrick approach later on in the presentation. So we're all about improving the knowledge of educators in the early years, supporting that professional development, encouraging the use of research evidence, but in sensible and practical ways. And a lot of our work is around blogging, making videos, conferences and other events, including webinars like this one. So, for example, if you look for the EEF on your social media, or if you search me on LinkedIn or Blue Sky, again, you'll see lots of our content that is shared in ways that are accessible on social media. We also have a network of Stronger Practice hubs, and you can link up with your local Stronger Practice hub to get support with staff professional development, improving practice, and lots of free opportunities through that Stronger Practice Hub network, which covers the whole country. And again, if you just search online Stronger Practice Hubs, you can find your local hub, you can connect with them, and they'll offer you lots of free support and professional development, which is really a great offer funded by the Department for Education. And there's more than 2,000 settings involved in that program now. So let's focus on the main topic today, which is partnership with parents and carers. And the research evidence is not as extensive as you might think it is, but it gives us some pretty strong pointers about what we might do to develop that partnership for the reason that is most important, which is boosting the children's learning. So the partnership is important in itself because you need those positive relationships with parents. You need to have that bedrock of being able to communicate well with each other in case something goes wrong or parents have got an issue they need to raise with you. But principally in early years education, this is about that child-centered approach. What is best for the child who's on roll in your setting? So we know that shared book reading is one of the most powerful activities that we can encourage parents and carers to take part in with their children at home. And by encouraging that, we can make a really big difference to children's speech, language, and communication. And that in turn will make a big difference to their emotional well-being, their ability to play, to make friends, to learn through EYFS and beyond. So that's the absolute number one priority for that engagement with parents, is around encouraging shared book reading. And again, I'll talk about that in some more detail as we go through. In addition to that, wider support for the home learning environment is also really powerful. So we know that parents who take their children to play out more, parents who have puzzles and magnetic numbers or other ways of introducing numbers and thinking about maths, these are all home learning practices which support children's development and learning. So there's some wider support that is worth thinking about. But the top priority is shared book reading, and that's where we've got the most evidence. So how are we going to get this key information across to parents? That's where we need to think about our approach to tips, support, and resources. So I think we've all known for a long time that just having a newsletter or giving parents and carers a letter or sending something out by email or on WhatsApp is always going to have limited impact. You know, you all know when you look at your phones, you get loads of emails and loads of WhatsApps, and just broadcasting a message isn't enough. This is about developing that relationship with parents and really making it clear why the things you're recommending are going to be important for them and make a difference to their child, given how pressured and time poor everyone is who's bringing up a child at the moment. Shared book reading, of course, takes in book gifting, and some of you might be involved in the Book Trust national program that's all about sharing free books with parents and carers at various stages in the early years. We know that book gifting is a great thing to do, but we also know from our evaluation that just giving out books doesn't make a difference to children. It's a little bit more complicated than that. So yeah, joining in with Bookstart, encouraging parents to join the local library, having books for children to take home in your setting. These are all good things, but in themselves, they won't make a difference. You need to think about more of the enabling factors if that's going to have an impact on the children. So let's just have a quick think about shared book reading. So if you go on Bookstart's website, you can see they've got some videos there that explain to parents what shared book reading is and how they can carry that out with their children. But in a nutshell, shared book reading means that you have the book with your child and you're using the book as a focus for conversation. So you're not just reading and wanting the child to sit and listen quietly. You're looking at the pictures together. You're having that conversation about the child's views about the pictures, what they like, what they might think, the children feel like when they've got that bear chasing after them. It's all about that back and forth conversation based around a book. And that's not necessarily that easy a message to get across to parents, which is one reason why the videos from Book Trust, but also the conversations between early years educators and parents are so important. Some parents might feel really low in confidence about reading a book to their child, but they might feel a bit more confident about sharing the book together, talking about the pictures, and exploring their children's thinking there. Again, just to kind of come back to get the research evidence about shared book reading, It's well known as one of the most powerful mechanisms to develop children's language and communication and to develop their vocabulary. It's a really powerful thing to do with children. That wider support for the home learning environment, which I talked about. If you go to the appendix of the DFE's Progress Check at Age 2 guidance, you'll see there's an infographic there to share with parents, which tells parents about some of the wider activities they could do that could really make a difference to their child's development. So that focus on play, being outdoors, children taking part in lots of activities at home and chatting with their parents as they do it. These are all really powerful, everyday things that parents can do at home that will make a difference. Interestingly, we know from lots of surveys of parents that there's still quite limited understanding of how important the early years are for children's learning and development. So the majority of parents and carers will think that the kind of crucial years for their child are the school years, primary school, secondary school, GCSEs. And of course, those years are really important. Actually, by age 5, 90% of a person's brain is developed, and 80% of that development happens in the birth to 3 phase. So early years are really crucial, but most parents aren't aware of that. It's not widely understood. So an infographic like this is also worth sharing with parents because it explains the importance of early years for children's learning and development. Again, to go back to the point that I made earlier, just giving parents this infographic is unlikely to be effective. But if you've got 5 minutes to sit down with a parent, talk about it, maybe look at one of the boxes and think about what it means, that's going to be much more powerful. Parents really trust and value the advice and support they get from their child's early years educator. So they're definitely looking to us as trusted people who they want to have those conversations with. We trialed an app called Easy Peasy, and some of you might be in local authorities where the LA funds the use of Easy Peasy. If your local authority doesn't fund it, it's still something that an early years setting can buy into. So the Easy Peasy app is based on people's phones, and what it does is it sends out regular messages to parents and carers suggesting play activities that they might like to do with their child. So it's not about children's spending time on screens, doing things on an app. It's about sending ideas and short video clips to parents and carers to give them ideas for the sort of play activities that will boost their child's development. And our evaluation told us that where parents and carers engaged with the Easy Peasy app, their children did better by the end of the EYFS. Particularly, it was positive for boys' communication by the end of the early years foundation stage. They've got some promising evidence that this app makes a difference to children. But again, the app itself is not the magic solution. You can send as many messages as you want through an app, but it really does depend on that relationship between the early years educator and the parent and carer. Someone regularly just having a check-in. How's it going with Easy Peasy? Have you found it useful? What went well? Yeah, I understand you're really busy, but should we have a look at the last video they sent together? Maybe that's something you could think of doing at home. Everything depends on that high quality relationship you develop with the parent and carer. Just having infographics, booklets, apps, etc. These things won't in themselves make much of a difference. It's how we do it as well as what we do that's important. So as well as Easy Peasy giving tips, there are other places you can go and get tips for parents and carers to use. Now, these aren't resources that we have trialed and evaluated at EEF. but we know lots of settings use them, and we know parents are positive about them. So let's just have a quick look at how Book Trust, for example, share ideas about nursery rhymes and singing with children. So Book Trust have got a range of videos, and they are useful to share with parents, because it's all very well me saying something like, be really great if you sang some of the nursery rhymes we do in nursery with your child, but a lot of parents feel quite low in confidence about that, and they'd really benefit from an example. What do we actually mean? What does that look like? And then that makes it much more real for everyone. But you can search online for those Book Trust videos, which show in really practical steps how you can sing and share a nursery rhyme with a child, how you can share a book with them. Again, another positive place to go for reputable advice, hints and tips to share with parents are NHS Better Health Start for Life, which has loads of really good information in it, and also Tiny Happy People from the BBC. Both of those sites, and you can search online for them, have some really great video clips. So that if you're trying to do something quite complex, like explain early language development to a parent where maybe you're a little bit worried about how their child is getting on, that can be really tricky to do. But by sharing and watching together one or two of those videos on Tiny Happy People about speech and language development, you can make it much more real and more accessible for parents. We all know how dodgy and dangerous it can be when people are searching online for parenting hints and tips. There's a lot of stuff out there, and a lot of it isn't reputable. So my experience at Sheringham Nursery School and Children's Centre was to promote reputable sources of information like Book Trust, like NHS Better Health, Start for Life, like BBC, Tiny Happy People. Share videos directly with parents, so talk with the parent, watch the video together, have a quick chat. You can often do that in less than 5 minutes. And if you're worried about a child, that can be a really good use of 5 minutes of your hard-pressed time. And then parents will often explore a bit more when they've got some time to do that at home. Okay, so we need, as I said earlier, we know that we need to go beyond book gifting, and particularly where we're concerned about a child's development, we might need to provide a lot of additional and extra support. And I think here the key thing to know is how you're going to signpost families to get that high level support they need. So as early as educators, as managers in nurseries, we can do a certain amount with sharing tips and ideas, signposting parents to places like Book Trust, BBC Tiny Happy People, and so on. But we know that for some families, the level of need they've got is well in excess of any of that being likely to be effective. So what you need to do is have those signposts to, for example, your local family hub, your local children's centre, that relationship with your health visitor team, so that where families need that more intensive and more tailored support, they might need, for example, to take part in a parenting program because they're really struggling with their child. Think about those signposts that you've got. Can you invite your family hub to come into your setting and have a presence there once a month? Or can you have some leaflets, or can you share something electronically with your parents, for example? Okay, so I'm going to skip this video because we've had some difficulties with video and audio. But just to say that if you search online for the Shrek approach, SHREC, you'll see there's a video on YouTube about that. And we made that video with Sheringham Nursery School and Education Endowment Foundation to explain to practitioners the key steps to take, informed by research evidence, to boost children's communication. And it's been really effective in improving practice on the ground in settings. But a spin-off of that is that it's also been really effective when working with parents. So settings have shared that video with parents and carers to explain the approach they take to developing children's early communication. And it gives parents a clearer idea of what it is we're doing and what we're talking about. And the better parents and carers can understand the approach we're taking in our setting, the better the joint working will be. Just to take you through last few bits and pieces here, the DFE's Development Matters Guidance has a short section, number 7 there, about partnership with parents. So it's worth having a quick look at what Development Matters says about the importance of that partnership with parents. And Development Matters picks up on the NHS advice, which is to use this really straightforward term, chat, play, read. It's 3 things that are very actionable that parents and carers can do that will support their children's early learning and development. Chat, play, read. There's also the progress check at 2. That's got some much more detailed guidance about how to communicate with parents and carers, and in particular, some of the undoubted sensitivities around talking to a parent or carer when you're concerned that their child might have a special educational need or another issue where they need extra help. So progress check at age 2 has got some really good guidance in it to help you. There's the What to Expect in the Early Years Foundation Stage Guide for Parents. Again, you can search online for that. It's free to download. And that's a really powerful document because it makes more friendly what we do in the EYFS. It makes it parent friendly. What's important? What are the sorts of things parents and carers can do, as well as explaining the way we think about children's learning and development through the EYFS. So that's a free guide. It's been deliberately optimized for people to look at it on phones and tablets. So it's not intended to be printed, it's intended to be shared electronically. Why does all of this matter? Because our analysis of the research evidence here at Education Endowment Foundation tells us that when we get parental engagement right, it can give children a 5 months boost to their learning. That's a really big boost. So if you think about all of the benefits children will get if they're chatting, playing, reading at home, if we've got that good partnership so that parents and carers understand what we're doing and can build on it, if parents and carers can be persuaded even once a week to share a book with their child and sing a nursery rhyme with them, all of these things can make a really big difference to children's outcomes. And we know that that can be important, not just when the children are young, but can give them those lifelong benefits. So, for example, a child's vocabulary at 5 is linked to them being a better reader at 11, better GCSE results at 16, more likely to get a degree by age 30, more likely to be in better health through their adulthood. So that these little things that we can encourage parents and carers to do with their children around shared book reading, chatting, playing, singing nursery rhymes, they're little things that can have a really big impact on children. So I'm going to end there and hand over to the team for any questions.
Thank you so much, Julian. Wow, those statistics are quite shocking, isn't it? I think when you actually hear what you've just said, how a child's development from the age of five years, actually how that impacts in later life, that's really staggering. And I think sometimes, it's like you say, we do underestimate the impact that this early years have, you know, and how important these years of development is. So thank you so much again for that presentation. It was really good. We've got a few questions. I see there's one in the chat as well from Flutura. So apologies if I've not pronounced that correctly. So I'm going to just quickly read your question. When is the proper time to introduce book reading to children? My grandson is 2 years old and I've already done that since 6 months. But when do I insist on persuading him to read?
Okay, that's a really good question. So as Flutura is saying, we can share books with children from babyhood onwards, and it's it's a lot of fun, isn't it, to go into the library or the bookshop and to look at those books for babies and to share them with little ones. As a rule of thumb, best thing we can all do when children are in the nursery phase, if you like, they're not in reception yet, they're children up to 4 years old. In general, the most powerful thing we can do is share books with those children and help them build that vocabulary and also that wider language development, which is really important. So even a really simple picture book has often got the sort of words that you wouldn't normally hear every day in your life. And it also will often have quite complex language. So if you think of The Very Hungry Caterpillar, which is a book lots of us have shared with kids, you know, that begins in the light of the moon. Now, not many of us open a conversation with a child with a phrase like "in the light of the moon." So books are a gateway for more complex language and vocabulary for children. So the key thing to do when they're little is share books, get children to talk about the book, help them build their vocabulary and their understanding of language, give them those positive attitudes to books. In terms of teaching children to read and expecting them to read, that's what reception classes are really good at. In reception classes, that final year of the EYFS, there's that really strong focus on children learning phonics, learning how to decode simple and then increasingly complex words through the scheme, but also continuing to enjoy shared book reading and those picture books and all of the stories. There isn't any evidence that introducing phonics to children at a younger age is worth doing, and Ofsted don't look at phonics until the reception year. There's no real reason to focus on phonics at all. What will really make a difference to children is that they love books and that they've got strong language development. And as I said, a child's vocabulary at 5, that's the really important one. That's the big predictor of how well they'll read, how well they'll do all the way through schooling and actually all the way through life. So focusing on children's back and forth language conversation, that's what we should be doing.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Wow, that's a really good comprehensive answer. That's great. Just had another one come through. I've got some questions that someone has sent me privately, but I was putting to say Marsh Linda, so apologies again if I pronounced your incorrectly. My children started with a play bus from Woodland Park Children's Centre 24 years ago and borrowing books and puzzles, and they'll still have the love for books. We do invite parents to read with the children in the nursery, but not anymore. Not many come forward. What is the best possible approach to get parents engaged?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't know if that's the same Woodlands Park Children's Centre where I worked back in the late 90s, but maybe it is, which would be a nice thought. If parents, you know, some parents will come in and share books with kids in nursery, and that's great. But I think we have to be honest that for a lot of parents, that is going to feel quite daunting. They're going to feel a bit on show. They might not be that keen to do it. So I think realistically, a few parents will come forward, and that's great and a really good thing to do. But I think it would be unrealistic for us to expect that many parents to want to spend time in nursery and share books with their children. You know, again, I don't know what other people's experiences are, but when I used to go into reception with my daughter, it was always quite fraught because I felt like she would play up a bit, or, you know, everyone else seemed to be really getting on with reading and sharing books, and I felt like I wasn't really doing that well with her. And it's just one of those pressured situations for parents and carers. Some people are up for it, some less so. So I would say, think about programs like book trusts to get books into the homes of children, libraries, lending books from your nursery. Those are all really good things to get books into the home, but they won't do the full lift. The heavy lifting really is your relationship with the parent. Explain the best way of sharing a book with a child. Show them how you do it. Share one of those videos with them. Encourage them to go to story time at the library so they can see someone do it. Because unless we explain exactly what we mean by sharing a book with a child, we can't just assume parents are going to just understand naturally. It's something that we have to support parents with and explain.
Brilliant. Thank you, Julian. One of the questions I have is around technology, and I've just seen a question that's come in about using technology. For Maria has said, is it okay to read a book like, for example, Going on a Bear Hunt, which is one of my favorites, and then watch a video so the children can relate to the book with a story on TV? And I find they engage more on the books next time when we read it. Is that something that you would advocate?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would go off what Maria has said there, which is that they relate to the book even better if they've watched the video as well as sharing the book. I think that there's certainly concern about what's called passive screen time. In other words, children sitting silently and watching YouTube videos, for example. There's little doubt that passive screen time damages children's early development, including their speech and language. So that's something to share with parents, that lots of passively watching screens isn't good for their children. But more active use of screens, like watching something together, talking about it, or like Maria is saying, where what they see on the screen relates to the book, so that then next time you share the book, they're more engaged. That's a really sensible approach to take. So, like everything, tech can be a brilliant bonus. You could go onto YouTube now, find Michael Rosen reading We're Going on a Bear Hunt, and have a fabulous time with some children. And when I first started working in the early years, that would have been really difficult. You'd have to try to source the video cassette, get hold of it, show it to the children on TV. We can do it really easily now, and it's great we can do that. So there's upsides, but the downside is that just passively watching a screen is not good for children's development. And because it reduces the amount of conversation they're having, it damages their language development.
Brilliant, thank you. Kira has had a good suggestion just to share with everybody. They're saying that they actually hold grandparent days where we invite grandparents in to read, although they are encouraged to come in whenever they would like to read with the children. But sometimes grandparents have more free time. That's true, isn't it? There's a lot of stats out now that the grandparents are becoming the new child carers, aren't they? Because they've got more free time, and you've got two working parents in a lot of cases.
I agree, Adele. When you're thinking about engagement, think about the whole family. Don't just think about the kind of direct parenting carers. It's a really important point.
We had Rebecca who shared, we do this at our setting, then we speak about what they preferred, what they didn't like it, etc. So they love acting out the stories based on what they've read and then seen too, which then leads to a great helicopter story. That's interesting. Rebecca, that might be a one for another day for you to share with us.
Yeah, sounds good, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, definitely. So we've got one for, hi, Julian, thank you very much for encouraging. How can we encourage parents to reduce screen time for our children? Only a few parents are reading their phonics reading books, reception, and the children are going home straight to screens. We've had reading parents workshops, but very low attendance. Thank you, Julian. Have you got a response to that?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I can sort of sit here in the EF's office and kind of say, oh, do X, Y, and Z. And I want to just acknowledge that it's not easy. Lots of us are going to be in situations, and I've been in those situations, where you're trying your level best and things just aren't going as positively as you'd like. So what should we do when that happens? If you're like me, what you do is you kind of think you're getting it wrong, and you kind of maybe a bit self-critical, or you might sort of feel like it's the parents' fault, and people might be quite negative about the parents and carers. And I would really not go down either of those roads if I were you. You've got a practical problem. There's some information you're trying to share with parents, but it's not landing. So why is that? Because I'm really convinced from the work I've done in the field that when you talk one-to-one with parents and carers and wanting the best for their child, they do. And I've never met a parent who wouldn't like their child to do really well through early years and through school. So something goes wrong in the gaps sometimes. So what are the things that you can do to review your approach to working with parents and carers? I think a useful thing to do is survey parents and carers so that they can anonymously feed back what they like, what they'd like more of, what they don't like. Chat to parents. So when I was working for Ofsted, and sorry for mentioning the O word here, but one of the things we do when those of us working for Ofsted, as I was then, part of the inspection process is talking to parents and carers at the gates about their experiences. And parents and carers are often really ready to tell you lots of stuff, and the school would often be quite surprised. And I often used to reflect, well, it's a shame in a way that there weren't more school staff out there regularly, just chatting to parents, getting their views, making sure that parents feel free to share views, even if they're critical. So not being defensive, but just listening is really important. Parents and carers are really busy and a lot are doing shift work, and parenting, I think, is really hard today. So, of course, people have periods of the day when they want their child to be occupied and probably silently watching a screen. So I think what we've got to do is be sort of sensible and pragmatic. That is part of modern life for young children. So what we're saying to parents is just don't let it get out of hand. Make sure that there's also time when children are playing actively, when they're outdoors, when we're chatting, playing, reading with them. So the Royal Foundation's research showed us that where parents feel stressed, if they feel professionals are giving them advice that is critical of what they're doing, they'll just switch off. They don't have the bandwidth both to cope with the day-to-day pressure of being a parent and hearing someone telling them that in effect they're doing it wrong. So we've got to be really careful that we give positive and realistic messages to parents and carers. And what we're trying to do is just nudge a bit more of the positive behaviours that will make a difference to the child. So being positive, repeating those messages, making sure they're practical, being open with parents, hearing critical feedback as well as positive feedback. I think these are all really important. And one of the things it says early on in the EF guidance report, which I mentioned, which is probably not in focus there, working with parents to support children's learning, one of the first things we say there is critically review the way you work with parents and carers. Ask them as a starter.
No, that's great. Thanks so much, Julian. That's really fantastic advice there. Petra's got her hand up, and I have enabled your mic, Petra. So if you want to put yourself off mute, you should be able to ask your question. Let me know once you've done that.
We've got a few more questions have come in, Adele, as well.
Okay,
well,
we've got
maybe while Petra's waiting doing that, maybe we could ask another one.
Yeah, that's fine. So we've got a question here for where a child's going to primary school has been deferred. So what advice would you give children that stay in nursery up to the age of 5 as the parents have deferred their school space? Obviously, they're saying that how can we support their reading and writing without the same qualifications as a teacher? Have you come across that, or any advice you can give on that one?
Yeah, I think it's deferred school entry is quite tricky because first of all, parents might choose to defer for a range of reasons, but secondly, it doesn't always join up as well as we would hope it to. So, for example, I've come across cases where the parent has successfully deferred school entry for their child, but then their child has had to skip a year when they're in school to put them back in the age group that the school wants them to be in, which was obviously probably no one's intention at the beginning of the discussion. So the first thing I'd say about deferrals is it's important that there's real clarity between the parent, the early years setting, and the school about what's happening. So if, as is the intention in the deferral approach, the child is going to start reception a little bit later than they might have done otherwise, then it's still appropriate for that child to have the nursery curriculum because they're going to move on into reception, get the reception curriculum. We would all be optimistic that things will fall into place for that child. If there isn't that strong relationship between the setting, the school, and the parent, and there's a lack of clarity, that's when I really worry. And I would say one of the key messages at the heart of all of this is make sure we're all really clear about what we're doing and what we want for the child. But there shouldn't be a presumption that a child who is starting reception later than their peers because of deferred school entry then needs the reception curriculum in nursery, because they should be moving into reception where they'll get the reception curriculum.
Brilliant. I don't know if anybody else has looked in the chat, but there's some fantastic ideas that people have shared. I just wanted to get to our last question just before we wrap up. As a nursery setting, will providing parents with books or library with prompts and resources be useful? I know you said some in your presentation, which is some good ideas on that. Any ideas of how this could be more effective?
Again, I would really go back to talking with parents and carers, so get feedback from them. So just to run down what we know from the research evidence, we know from the research evidence that just gifting or lending books to parents doesn't in itself make a difference. So if we're going to make a difference, we need to go beyond that. We need to give parents the ongoing support, advice, tips to make the best use of those resources. So we have at the EF got some research evidence behind, for example, the Easy Peasy app as a way of sharing that sort of information with parents and carers. Otherwise, we're really going on sound principles rather than research evidence. So talk with parents. Are they finding time to read with their children? Do they stop and talk about the book rather than just reading it to the child? Does their child look forward to sharing a story? And just get feedback from parents to inform your approach. But the key thing I'd say is that just sending books home or giving books to parents, there isn't any evidence that that makes a difference. You've got to provide them with that all-round support, advice, hints and tips.
Brilliant. We actually have a parent who's joined this webinar today and has said, as a teenager, I used to read 4 to 5 books a day, and I would narrate the whole story to my family and friends. But as a parent, I'm finding it difficult to get my children to read a page to me because they get easily giving up when they're reading. How can I inspire my children to want to read more and longer and enjoy reading as much as I used to? I really want them to read more often. That's quite an interesting point because we've got a parent. So there you go.
It is. And it's great to hear from a parent. And I know this is going to sound a bit of a cop-out, but there's not really enough information there to give a sensible answer. But what I can say is that we know from the research evidence that what's important for children is, first of all, as they move through their early years and into school, that they love books. Sharing books is fun, something they look forward to. And sometimes the advice then is just kind of cut it a bit short if children are losing interest and pick it up again later, rather than keeping them at something that they don't really want to do, which will then lead to maybe more negative actions. So sharing books with children from their earliest years onwards is really important, both reading to them, but also using the book as a focus for conversation, and also all those rhymes and nursery rhymes are really important. And then we also know from the research evidence that an effective and balanced approach to the teaching of reading that includes phonics from reception, but also has a focus on children's oral language development and their understanding of the book. That's really crucial. So we know quite a lot about what will help with early reading. But of course, like anything else in life, there's the child's individual preferences and temperament and the pressures on family life. And we all have to kind of adapt around that.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, I'm going to try one more time to see if we can get Petra to unmute herself and ask the question. Let's see. Okay.
Yes. I want to share information that this is possible. Sharing ideas. I have a year working in my nursery, and that is true when he said about to get ready the children to the reception. I working with all different age, and I can see now because I'm with the big children, parents is more worrying to the children get ready faster for the reception than when I have them before in the other room. I was like, oh, in the other room they didn't care too much, but now they are rushing like, oh, I have the children ready, they go to the reception. In my nursery, in other nursery, we teach phonics and we teach different areas of math as well. It's like the plus for the nursery. But my experience with the parent is first the culture. Some parents don't feel confident for the English, so they don't feel confident to come and read the book sometime. What sometimes I do, I teach Spanish to my children as well. And I try to involve different cultures. So I invited to them, oh, this is a culture day, we're celebrating. You can come, speak about your country, or child can say something about your country, and they feel more happy to enjoy that. Sometimes when they has a new baby, they struggle because the child feel more emotional with these days. So we invited to the parents to with the babies, and they show the baby to other children, and that is really good idea. I really recommend it. Some children has pets, and depending on the personality of the pet, we asking some questions. They coming with the pet and with the dog, and the parent feel more confident to sharing with the children than read sometimes a book, because I understand sometimes it's not confident to read a book to the children. But we have different ways to do sharing the babies, coming to sharing with the dogs, sharing about the cultures. When I teach Spanish, the parent is very open to me, and they say, oh, Kathy, I love the Spanish. My children love Spanish. Can you share with me some songs? Can you share with me some links, some information? So what we can do, we can make a video of singing in Spanish or singing the song and send to them. We use Family, we use the apps. No, I don't know the other nursery. So I think we different ways to sharing with information with parents, and we put the parent in with us. We're doing some. We invited them to do activity with the children so they can feel more confident to enjoy and get engaged to enjoy the early year with them, because it's very important for them.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That sounds quite good. Good engagement there with your parents, and I can see like the EAL is not their first language, so that sometimes can be a barrier. So that's a good point to make as well. Thank you. Julian, do you have anything to add to that before we wrap up for the day?
It was great to hear that. So thank you, Catherine, for bringing that in. There's a useful point in the chat, which is well made, which is, choose books on topics that children are interested in, because we want to fuel their curiosity and their interest. And then just very briefly about English as an additional language. All of these approaches are important for children learning EAL. So if you look at the Shrek video, you'll see that most of those children are learning EAL. We know that having more than one language is really positive for children. It's vital that we don't see it as like a problem or a barrier. Multilingualism is the norm across the world. So developing children's communication through those back and forth conversations, as shown in the Shrek approach, that's positive for all children, EAL children included.
Fantastic. Julian, it's been an amazing time with you this morning. I'm sure everybody in the comments has been fantastic. So thank you for giving up your time and everybody else. So I just wanted to say from our side, thanks again for joining us. Don't forget, everybody, when you get the recording, you can claim your free CPD certificate that you can get on the recording from this webinar that will come out to you via email, and it will also be on our YouTube channel. And we will see you all next month for our webinar. Thanks so much and have a fantastic day.
Right.
Thanks, Julian.
Thank you for joining. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Adele. Thanks,
Thank
Gail.
you.
Bye-bye.